The laughter started the moment 61-year-old Logan Long drove a faded red Farmall 560 straight into the foreclosure auction of Granger John Deere. Men standing beside shiny pickup trucks smirked, while the old tractor rattled smoke across Main Street. Wesley Granger froze the second Logan stepped down, holding a bank envelope thick with certified papers. Now let me tell you something. 14 years earlier, Wesley had fired Logan in front of half the county for fixing worthless red junk. And before sunset that same day, Logan Long would own the building Wesley lost. If you've ever watched quiet men get mistaken for failures, stay with me. Let me tell you about Logan Long before Harper Ridge started calling him a legend. Back then, most people just called him old-fashioned. And in small farming towns across Kansas, that word could sound dangerously close to useless. Logan was born in 1951 on a wheat farm 15 miles outside Harper Ridge, where winter winds rattled loose barn tin like warning bells, and every man learned early that broken machinery could destroy an entire season. His father, Walter Long, never trusted dealerships much, said they sold farmers shiny promises right before collecting the bank's interest. So instead of buying new equipment, Walter repaired everything himself. Farmalls, Olivers, old cases with cracked manifolds and leaking seals, machines other men dragged behind barns to rust into the dirt. That was where Logan learned. Not from books, not from college, but from grease under fingernails and midnight repairs under hanging work lamps while cold Kansas wind pushed dust through broken barn boards. By 12 years old, Logan could identify engine problems just by sound. By 16, farmers were already stopping by the Long property, asking the quiet teenager to listen to tractors that local mechanics couldn't fix. And Logan rarely spoke much while working. That bothered people sometimes. Now, let me pause here. Quiet men make loud people uncomfortable, especially men who mistake confidence for competence. By the late 1980s, Granger John Deere had become the biggest agricultural dealership in Harper County. Huge green signs stood beside Highway 14 like church towers for modern farming. Wesley Granger loved that image, loved polished floors, loved expensive combines lined up beneath fluorescent lights, loved talking about the future of agriculture. But Logan Long loved machines that survived. There's a difference. Wesley Granger inherited the dealership from his father, but unlike the old man, Wesley cared more about expansion than farmers. He wanted newer inventory every year, bigger loans, more financing packages, more technology, and eventually fewer repairs. Because repairs didn't make real money, selling debt did. Still, Wesley kept Logan around because even he couldn't deny the truth. Logan was the best mechanic in the building. Customers trusted him more than the salesmen, more than the managers, hell, sometimes more than the company itself. Farmers would drive past 2 other dealerships just to ask Logan to listen to an engine for 5 minutes. And most of the time, Logan already knew the problem before lifting the hood. Fuel starvation, bad injector timing, hydraulic pressure leak. Simple words, calm voice, problem solved. But there was one thing Wesley Granger hated. Logan never worshipped John Deere. That mattered more than outsiders understand. In towns like Harper Ridge, machinery brands became religion. Men argued over Deere and International Harvester the way city people argued politics. Entire family identities got built around tractor colors. Green meant success. Red meant old struggle, at least according to Wesley. Logan didn't care about colors. He cared whether the machine started in January. He cared whether a farmer could finish harvest before rain destroyed the crop. And sometimes the old red Farmalls outworked machines worth 6 times as much. Logan knew it. Wesley hated that he knew it. One November afternoon, a rancher named Curtis Hale pulled an old Farmall 806 into the Granger service lot. Smoke poured from the exhaust. Paint peeled from the hood. The tractor looked half dead. Ethan Pike laughed the second he saw it. Now Ethan was 28 years old and wore pressed dealership shirts like a banker wears neckties. Wesley had recently promoted him to service manager because Ethan understood computers' inventory systems and warranty programs. But Ethan had never rebuilt an engine in a freezing barn at 2 in the morning with a farmer praying beside him. There's a difference there, too. That thing belongs in a museum, Ethan muttered. Curtis Hale heard him. So did Logan. Curtis removed his hat slowly. Machine still plants every acre I own. Ethan smirked. Could buy something newer. Curtis looked embarrassed after that. Sit with that for a moment. A lot of proud men start looking ashamed the second they can't afford what other people expect them to buy. Logan wiped his hands with an old rag and walked around the Farmall once without speaking. Then he rested one hand against the hood. Starter ain't the real issue, he said calmly. Curtis blinked. How'd you know listen to the crank speed? That was all, just 4 words. But Curtis Hale's shoulders relaxed, like somebody had finally spoken to him instead of down at him. Logan repaired the tractor himself later that evening after closing. Took him 3 hours. Curtis returned the next morning nearly speechless when the old Farmall started instantly in 20-degree weather. You saved my winter wheat, Curtis whispered. Logan shrugged. Machine just needed somebody patient. But Wesley Granger had been watching from the showroom windows, and what he saw irritated him more every month, because farmers kept thanking Logan instead of admiring the dealership. They trusted repair over replacement, and Logan Long represented everything Wesley wanted, the modern business model to leave behind. One night after closing, Wesley called Logan into his office. The office overlooked the showroom floor through glass walls like a king watching machinery instead of subjects. Wesley leaned back in his leather chair. You spend too much time on those old Farmalls. Logan stood silently. Wesley continued, We're trying to move this dealership forward. Farmers still use old tractors. For now. Logan finally looked at him. For longer than you think. Wesley's jaw tightened slightly. Now let me tell you something important. Men who build businesses around trends usually hate men who understand endurance, because endurance exposes how temporary trends really are. Wesley stood and walked toward the showroom window. Customers walk in here wanting progress, he said. Logan answered quietly. No, they walk in here scared of losing their farms. That sentence stayed in the room like smoke, because deep down, Wesley knew it was true. Every financing contract, every machinery upgrade, every massive loan wrapped in polished sales language, fear sat underneath all of it. Fear of falling behind, fear of appearing poor, fear of being the last man in town still driving a 20-year-old tractor. But Logan had spent his entire life around real farmers, and real farmers cared less about pride than survival. Outside, cold Kansas wind swept across the dealership lot. Rows of green tractors stood beneath security lights, shining against steel. Beautiful machines. Expensive machines. Machines most local farmers increasingly could not afford. And inside that brightly lit building stood 2 men looking at the future of agriculture from completely different directions. One believed survival came from expansion. The other believed survival came from reliability. Harper Ridge had no idea yet which man would be proven right. But the storm had already started building, and before long, the entire county would feel it. The day Logan Long got fired started with freezing rain and an old Farmall dragged into the Granger John Deere parking lot behind a dented pickup truck. Now sit with that image for a moment. Gray Kansas sky, frozen slush along the service bays, and one tired farmer hauling the last piece of machinery standing between his family and financial ruin. Harold Whitman was 73 years old that winter. Thin shoulders, weathered hands, the kind of man who removed his hat indoors even when nobody noticed anymore. His Farmall 806 looked rough. The hood rattled. One rear tire was patched with sidewall boots. Oil stained half the engine block, but that tractor had planted Harold's wheat for 21 years. And now it wouldn't start. Ethan Pike stepped outside holding a clipboard, and stopped dead when he saw the machine. "Oh, come on," he muttered. Harold climbed out of the pickup slowly. "Need somebody to look at her." Ethan barely glanced at the tractor. "We don't work on those anymore." Harold blinked. "It's an engine. It's obsolete. Now let me pause here. There are words businessmen use when they want to stop seeing human beings behind problems. Obsolete, unprofitable, outdated. Those words sound cleaner than saying, you can't afford to matter anymore." Harold shifted awkwardly in the freezing wind. "I can pay something." Ethan sighed impatiently. "Sir, diagnostic alone costs more than that tractor's worth." A few younger mechanics standing near the bay doors laughed quietly. Not cruel laughter exactly. Worse, dismissive laughter. The kind that strips dignity 1 inch at a time. Logan Long heard every word from inside Bay 3. He walked out slowly, wiping grease from his hands with an old red rag. "What's it doing?" he asked Harold. Harold looked relieved immediately. "Starter catches sometimes, then locks." Logan nodded once. "Battery's fine. Replaced it Tuesday." Logan walked around the Farmall once without speaking. Then he crouched near the flywheel housing listening. Actually listening, like the machine was trying to explain itself. Ethan crossed his arms. "Logan, we already told him we're not taking it." Logan ignored him. "Try the ignition." Harold climbed into the tractor seat, turned the key. The engine groaned once. Metal clanked hard, then silence. Logan stood up calmly. Broken starter tooth jammed against the flywheel. Harold stared at him. "That all probably," Ethan scoffed. "Probably you can't even source parts for that thing anymore." Logan looked toward Harold instead. "Bring it around back after closing." Ethan's expression hardened immediately. Now this matters, because Harper Ridge had started changing by then. Farmers were disappearing. Family land got sold off every year. Banks grew larger while farms grew emptier, and dealerships like Granger Deere had slowly stopped serving struggling farmers. They served financing systems. There's a difference there, too. That evening, snow started falling just after sunset. Most employees clocked out fast, eager to get home before roads iced over. But behind Bay 4, Logan stayed late. Harold waited nervously beside the old Farmall while Logan removed the starter assembly under a single hanging shop light. No music, no complaining, just tools clicking against steel. "You don't gotta do this," Harold said quietly. Logan didn't look up. "Yes, I do." Harold swallowed hard after hearing that, because tired men remember kindness longer than successful men remember favors. Inside the dealership showroom, Wesley Granger was finishing paperwork upstairs when he noticed lights still active in the rear service bay. He frowned immediately. Through the glass wall overlooking the garage floor, he saw the old red Farmall sitting beneath dealership lighting like some unwanted ghost from another era. And beside it stood Logan Long, still repairing junk. Wesley came downstairs, irritated, before he even reached the bay. Snow blew through the partially opened service door as he stepped inside. "What the hell is this?" Logan kept working. "Starter repair. I can see that." Harold removed his hat nervously. "I'll pay cash." "This isn't about cash," Wesley snapped. Two remaining mechanics froze nearby. Ethan appeared moments later from the parts office, instantly realizing trouble had arrived. Wesley pointed directly at the Farmall. "I told this dealership months ago we were done wasting labor hours on dead brands." Logan tightened a bolt quietly. "She isn't dead." Wesley laughed sharply. "That machine belongs in a scrapyard." Logan finally stood, and when he turned around there wasn't anger on his face. That almost made it worse. There was disappointment. "You ever notice," Logan said calmly, "the farmers driving machines like this are usually the ones barely hanging on." Wesley's jaw tightened. "This is a Deere dealership. This is a farming town." The room went silent. Even Ethan stopped moving. "Now let me tell you something important. Truth becomes dangerous the second it embarrasses powerful people in front of witnesses. Wesley stepped closer. You spend more time helping broke farmers than helping this business. Logan answered immediately. Without those farmers, there is no business. That did it. Wesley pointed toward the exit. You're done. Harold Whitman looked horrified. Now wait, I said he's done. Snow swirled outside the open bay door while the sound of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 27 years at Granger Deer ended in less than 10 seconds. Sit with that for a moment. 27 harvest seasons, 27 winters, thousands of repaired engines, and in the end, a man's value got measured against whether he helped people who couldn't spend enough money. Logan stared at Wesley quietly. Then he removed his gloves, not dramatically, not angrily, just slowly, like a man finally understanding something he should have understood years earlier. Ethan shifted awkwardly nearby but said nothing, because cowardice often hides behind silence when consequences arrive. Logan walked toward his toolbox in the corner of Bay 3. The old red metal chest had belonged to his father before him. Scratches covered every drawer. One handle had been welded twice. He opened it carefully. Wrenches, sockets, feeler gauges, worn smooth with age, a cracked timing light, 27 years of hands-on survival. The younger mechanics watched silently while Logan packed his tools. None of them helped, but none of them laughed anymore either. That matters too. Outside, across the road, Martha Reeves stood inside her diner window, drying coffee mugs when she noticed movement at the dealership. Then she saw Logan carrying his toolbox through the snow. Alone. Martha immediately understood. Small towns always know when dignity gets wounded. Harold followed Logan into the parking lot. I'm sorry, the old farmer whispered. Logan set the toolbox into the bed of his truck. Ain't your fault, but because of me. No. Logan looked back toward the brightly lit dealership, because some men forget what keeps towns alive. Snowflakes drifted across the hood of Harold's dead Farmall. Logan stared at the tractor for several seconds, then quietly asked, You still need that wheat planted? Harold nodded slowly. Logan grabbed his coat from the truck seat. Then let's finish the repair. Now let me pause here. That was the moment everything changed. Not when Logan got fired. Not when Wesley humiliated him. No, the real turning point came when Logan chose helping somebody over protecting his pride. Most revenge stories start with anger. The dangerous ones start with purpose. And before long, Harper Ridge was about to learn the difference. The garage behind Logan Long's farmhouse had once stored hay. That was before time hollowed it out. Before winters peeled paint from the wooden siding. Before the roof sagged low enough to groan during heavy snow. Most people driving past the property barely noticed it anymore, and that was exactly how Logan preferred things. 3 days after getting fired from Granger John Deere, he opened the old sliding barn doors just after sunrise and pushed Harold Whitman's Farmall inside. Cold January wind swept dust across the concrete floor, while weak morning light leaked through cracks in the walls. No polished showroom, no dealership banners, no fluorescent lighting, just tools, steel, and silence. Now let me tell you something. Some of the most important places in America never look important from the road. Logan spent the first week cleaning the garage alone. He repaired broken wiring, rebuilt an old workbench, hung rusted tools in careful rows, installed 2 salvaged heaters from a closed grain elevator outside Newton, and above the doorway he mounted a small hand-painted sign, Long Repair. Nothing more, no slogan, no phone number, no promises. Because men like Logan believed your reputation should travel farther than advertising. Martha Reeves was the first person outside Harold Whitman to visit the garage. She arrived carrying coffee in a cardboard tray from her diner just before sunrise on a Thursday morning. Logan was rebuilding a hydraulic pump under a hanging shop lamp when she walked in. You planning on freezing to death out here? She asked. Logan glanced up. Heater works. That heater was old when Reagan got elected. He almost smiled at that. Almost. Martha sat the coffee down on the bench beside him and looked around the garage, slowly. "You really doing this? Looks that way." Without dealership backing, Logan tightened a bolt quietly before answering. "Farmers still got broken tractors." Now sit with that for a moment. That was how Logan saw the world. Not through ambition, not through revenge, through responsibility. Outside, Harper Ridge kept moving without him. Granger John Deere still sold shiny new equipment beneath bright green signs. Wesley Granger acted publicly like Logan's firing meant nothing. But privately, he noticed things. Customers asking where Logan went, repair calls decreasing, older farmers hesitating before approving expensive replacement estimates, and most irritating of all, rumors, because small farming towns survive on two currencies, weather and stories. And the story spreading through Harper County sounded dangerous. Logan fixed Harold Whitman's Farmall for almost nothing. Logan got old Curtis Hale's combine running again. Logan repaired a hydraulic leak Deere wanted $8,000 to replace. Stories like that move faster than radio towers, especially during hard times. One icy February morning, a battered Oliver tractor rolled into Logan's driveway before daylight. Behind the wheel sat Earl Dunham, a cattle rancher nearly 70 years old. Earl climbed down slowly, transmission locked. Logan nodded toward the garage. "Back it in." That was the whole conversation. No sales pitch, no estimate paperwork, no corporate service language, just work. By springtime, more tractors started appearing. Case tractors, international harvesters, an old Minneapolis Moline with cracked steering linkage. Machines dealerships considered financially worthless. Machines families still depended on, and Logan treated every single one like it mattered. Because to somebody, it did. Now let me pause here. A strange thing happens when people feel humiliated long enough. The moment someone treats them with dignity again, they remember it forever. That was the real reason Logan's garage grew. Not because he was cheap, not even because he was talented, because farmers walked into that garage and felt respected. Wesley Granger didn't understand that. Men like Wesley measured success in square footage and inventory financing. Men like Logan measured success by whether a machine returned home running. There's a difference between servicing equipment and serving people. By late summer, the dirt parking area beside Logan's garage stayed crowded nearly every morning. Pickup trucks lined the fence row. Farmers drank coffee from thermoses while waiting for repairs. Some stayed just to talk. About crops, about diesel prices, about kids leaving farming for Wichita or Kansas City. And little by little, Logan's garage became something Harper Ridge had been losing for years. A place where struggling people still felt useful. One afternoon, Logan crawled beneath a leaking Farmall axle, while two farmers stood nearby arguing about whether younger generations would ever return to farming. "Kids don't want this life anymore," one man muttered. "Can't blame 'em," the other nodded sadly. Logan slid out from under the tractor, slowly grease streaked across both forearms. "They'd stay," he said quietly, "if towns stopped treating survival like failure." Neither man answered, because deep down they knew he was right. Meanwhile, across town, Granger Deere continued expanding. Wesley installed new showroom lighting, purchased expensive diagnostic systems, added touchscreen inventory stations. Ethan Pike bragged constantly about modernization. "Future's electronic," he told customers, but electronics came with loans, and loans came with pressure. And pressure makes desperate people hide problems until those problems become disasters. Logan saw it happening long before others did. One rainy evening, Harold Whitman stayed late after picking up his repaired tractor. The two men sat near the garage heater drinking black coffee while thunder rolled across distant wheat fields. "You missed the dealership?" Harold asked. Logan stared quietly at the rain for several seconds. "No." Harold looked surprised. "Not even a little." Logan shook his head once. "Too much selling, not enough fixing." That sentence explained almost everything about him. Now let me tell you something important. People think revenge stories are built on anger. Most aren't. Most are built on freedom. The moment somebody stops needing approval from the people who underestimated them, everything changes. And Logan Long had stopped needing Wesley Granger's approval the night he carried that old toolbox into the snow. That summer drought hit western Kansas hard. Fields dried early, corn curled beneath brutal heat, and suddenly many farmers delayed equipment payments. That terrified dealerships. Because dealerships don't survive on admiration, they survive on monthly financing. Wesley responded by pushing sales harder, more upgrades, more trade-ins, longer financing contracts, higher pressure, but pressure creates cracks, and the cracks had already started forming. One afternoon, Martha Reeves walked into Logan's garage, carrying pie wrapped in foil. "You hear what Wesley said about you?" Logan kept rebuilding a carburetor. "No," said, "you're running a retirement home for dead tractors." A couple farmers nearby chuckled awkwardly. Logan continued working without looking up. Finally, he said, "Funny thing about old tractors." Martha crossed her arms. "What's that?" "They usually stay paid off." Silence hit the garage. Then every farmer inside laughed harder than they had in weeks. Not because the joke was cruel, because it was true. And truth sounds especially good to people drowning in debt. Outside, evening sun dropped low across Kansas wheat fields, while wind rocked the cottonwoods near the road. The old garage glowed warm against the fading light. Inside stood farmers most of modern agriculture had already started treating like leftovers, and in the center of them stood Logan Long, quiet, grease-covered, still rebuilding machines everybody else had given up on. Harper Ridge still thought Wesley Granger owned the future, but futures built on pride rarely notice when endurance starts gathering strength in silence. And out behind those wheat fields, something dangerous had already begun growing. Trust. The first time Noah Bennett walked into Logan Long's garage, he looked half-starved and completely exhausted. Rainwater dripped from the hood of his faded sweatshirt, while cold October wind rattled the loose tin above the garage roof. Logan was rebuilding a carburetor at the workbench when the kid stepped quietly through the open door. Noah couldn't have been older than 19. Thin frame, sunken eyes, hands already rough from farm labor, but there was something else too: shame. Now let me tell you something. Poverty changes the way people enter rooms, especially young men. They start apologizing with their posture before saying a single word. Noah removed his cap awkwardly. "You hiring Logan?" kept working for several seconds before answering. "No." The boy nodded once like he expected that, then turned toward the door. But Logan noticed something before Noah left. The kid had stopped to look at the tools, not casually, carefully, the way mechanics do. "Your family farms?" Logan asked. Noah hesitated. "Used to." That answer told Logan almost everything. Used to. 2 words carrying an entire funeral inside them. Logan finally set the carburetor down. What happened? Noah stared at the concrete floor. Dad refinanced equipment 3 years straight. He swallowed hard. Corn prices dropped. Bank took the North Fields in April. Outside rain hammered harder against the metal roof. Logan leaned back slightly against the bench. "Your father's still farming, trying. Trying means no." Noah looked up sharply. Because nobody in Harper Ridge spoke plainly anymore. Everybody softened disaster with polite language. Transitioning, downsizing, financial restructuring. But farms don't disappear through business vocabulary. They disappear because tired men run out of options. "He drives trucks now," Noah admitted quietly. Logan nodded once, then asked, "You know engines a little. You willing to learn?" Noah blinked. That was the closest thing to a job offer Logan Long had ever given anybody. The next morning, Noah arrived before sunrise, and from that day forward, Harper Ridge started seeing a second figure inside Long Repair, a quiet old mechanic and a skinny farm kid learning how not to lose himself. Now sit with that for a moment, because some men save communities without ever realizing they're doing it. Logan never called Noah an apprentice. Never gave speeches, never acted sentimental. He simply taught, slowly, patiently. The first lesson took nearly 2 hours, not because it was complicated, because Logan believed rushing created careless mechanics. "This engine talking to you," he asked, while pointing toward a rough-running Farmall ignition system. Noah looked confused. Talking Logan nodded. "Every machine tells you what hurts if you listen long enough." That sentence stayed with Noah for years. Soon the garage settled into rhythm. Farmers arrived before daylight carrying broken alternators, cracked manifolds, seized bearings leaking hydraulics. Coffee brewed constantly. The heaters rattled all winter. And nearly every customer entering long repair looked financially exhausted. Some tried hiding it, others didn't bother anymore. One rancher named Dean Holloway stood near the parts shelf one evening, staring silently at a repair invoice. Logan noticed immediately. "You short." Dean looked embarrassed. "Little. How much you got?" Dean handed him folded cash from his coat pocket. "It wasn't even half." Logan counted it once and shoved the invoice toward him. "You're good." Dean stared at him. "That ain't enough. Tractor starts, doesn't it?" Dean's eyes watered unexpectedly. "Now let me pause here. Men who spend their lives providing for others often break emotionally the second somebody helps them without humiliation." Dean grabbed the invoice quickly and left before speaking again. Noah watched the whole thing. "You're losing money doing that." Logan returned to the workbench. "No." "How's that?" Logan glanced toward the parking lot where Dean's truck disappeared into snow. "Town loses money when farms die." That was another thing Noah never forgot. Meanwhile, Granger John Deere continued changing, and not for the better. Wesley Granger expanded financing programs aggressively after several profitable years. Ethan Pike pushed computerized service systems harder every month. Tablets replaced paper logs. Diagnostic fees increased. Repair approvals required corporate authorization. Farmers waited weeks for electronic parts, but out at Long Repair machines got fixed. Fast. One freezing January night, Martha Reeves closed her diner early during a snowstorm and drove coffee out to Logan's garage. Inside, she found 6 farmers crowded around the heater while Noah welded a cracked hitch assembly under Logan's supervision. Country radio played softly somewhere in the background. Steam rose from wet coats hanging near the furnace. For a moment, the garage looked less like a repair shop and more like the last surviving piece of old Harper Ridge. Martha smiled quietly. "You boys look like a union meeting." One farmer laughed. "Closest thing this county's got left." And honestly, that wasn't far from the truth, because Long Repair had become more than a business. It became a refuge for men slowly disappearing from modern agriculture, men buried beneath loans, men embarrassed by debt, men tired of being treated like outdated equipment themselves. Now let me tell you something important. Communities don't collapse all at once. They disappear piece by piece. One farm auction, one foreclosure, one exhausted family leaving town after dark. And sometimes the only thing holding those communities together are small places nobody important notices, like diners, church basements, and old repair garages behind wheat fields. One afternoon, Noah asked Logan something he'd been wondering for months. "Why didn't you leave after Granger fired you?" Logan kept adjusting valve clearances without looking up. "Leave for where? Wichita, maybe." "Salina, bigger shops." Logan shrugged. "Farmers still here." Noah studied him carefully. "You ever want to get even with Wesley?" The garage fell quiet except for ticking engine metal cooling near the wall heater. Finally, Logan answered, "No." Noah frowned slightly. Not even after what he did. Logan wiped grease from his hands slowly. "People think revenge means hurting somebody back." He nodded toward the tractors outside. "Most times it just means outlasting them." That sentence settled deep into Noah Bennett's bones. Outside, winter winds swept across empty Kansas fields beneath a pale gray sky. And while Long Repair quietly grew stronger, Granger Deere quietly grew colder. Customers increasingly complained about costs. Repair waits stretched longer. Wesley blamed economic cycles. Ethan blamed older farmers refusing to modernize. But neither man understood the real problem. Trust was leaving. And once trust leaves a farming town, it rarely comes back. One February morning, Clay Turner from First Prairie Bank stopped by Logan's garage unexpectedly. Now, Clay wasn't a cruel man, but bankers carry a certain look after enough years handling debt, a cautious sadness. He walked slowly around the crowded garage while farmers worked beside Logan and Noah. "Busy place," Clay remarked. Logan nodded once. Clay lowered his voice. "You hearing what's happening at Granger Gnome? They're leveraged deep." Logan returned to rebuilding a hydraulic cylinder. Clay watched him carefully. "You don't sound surprised." Logan finally looked up. "Debt grows faster than crops." The banker almost smiled, because he knew that was true too. That spring more tractors arrived than ever before. Some needed repairs, some just needed hope. And every evening as sunset burned gold across the Kansas wheat fields, tired farmers still gathered inside that weathered garage behind Logan Long's farmhouse. Not because it was modern, not because it was impressive, but because inside those walls, nobody got treated like they were already obsolete. And little by little, Harper Ridge began remembering something dangerous. Reliability matters more than image when survival gets hard. By the 7th year after firing Logan Long, Wesley Granger owned the biggest agricultural dealership in 3 counties, and somehow he had never felt more afraid. Now that fear didn't show publicly. Men like Wesley learned long ago how to disguise panic behind polished boots and expensive watches. From the outside, Granger John Deere still looked successful. Huge inventory yard, bright green combines, corporate banners hanging from steel rafters, service trucks lined up like military vehicles beside the highway. But debt has a smell to it, and people who've survived hard years long enough can sense it before bankers admit it exists. Logan Long smelled it almost immediately. One windy March afternoon, Clay Turner from First Prairie Bank stood inside Long Repair watching Noah rebuild a hydraulic valve body. Outside dry Kansas, dirt rolled across the fields like smoke. Clay wrapped both hands around a paper coffee cup. "You know Wesley refinanced the dealership again?" Logan didn't look up from the transmission housing he was cleaning. Clay studied him carefully. "You don't seem surprised by anything anymore." Logan finally answered. "People borrowing against next year usually means this year already failed." That sentence stayed with Clay long after he left, because it was true. Granger Deere had expanded too aggressively. Wesley borrowed millions, upgrading service systems, computerized inventory, climate-controlled showrooms, and new high-horsepower equipment packages. But farming had changed. Margins got thinner, fuel got more expensive, weather grew unpredictable, and farmers increasingly couldn't afford to keep pretending every problem could be solved with a newer machine. Still, Wesley refused to slow down, because slowing down would have felt like weakness, and pride is expensive when borrowed money starts collecting interest. Meanwhile, Long Repair kept growing quietly, not fast, not flashy, just steady, the kind of growth rooted in trust instead of advertising. Noah Bennett had become skilled enough by then that farmers specifically requested him on smaller repairs. Logan still handled engine rebuilds and diagnostics, but Noah could now rebuild carburetors, repair hydraulics, and troubleshoot ignition systems almost entirely alone. One evening after closing, Noah stood staring at a half-disassembled Farmalls transmission while Logan swept the floor nearby. "You ever think this place gets too busy?" Noah asked. Logan shrugged. "Busy's better than empty." "No, I mean—" Noah hesitated. "Maybe we should expand." That made Logan stop sweeping. "Expand how? Bigger building, maybe. More lifts. Hire guys." Logan leaned quietly on the broom handle. "You know what happens when businesses get too big." Noah smiled slightly. "They make more money." "No." Logan glanced around the garage. "They stop seeing people." Outside, wind rattled the loose siding while sunset faded across the wheat fields. Noah nodded slowly, because he understood exactly who Logan meant. Across Harper Ridge, Wesley Granger no longer recognized half the farmers entering his own dealership. They were customer accounts now, financing profiles, warranty packages, not neighbors, not families, not men one bad harvest away from losing everything. That distance matters more than businessmen realize. One hot July afternoon, Granger Deere hosted a customer appreciation event with catered barbecue and corporate representatives from Wichita. Wesley stood near the showroom entrance, shaking hands beside shiny new combines worth more than most houses in Harper County. Ethan Pike gave presentations about GPS systems and automated harvesting software. Modern agriculture requires modern investment, Ethan told the crowd confidently. But several farmers standing near the coffee station exchanged quiet looks after hearing that, because most of them were already drowning in modern investment. One older rancher whispered, "Machine costs more than my land." Another muttered, "Bank owns half these tractors before they leave the lot." Now let me tell you something important. People stop admiring luxury the second survival becomes uncertain. That same afternoon, 6 miles outside town, Logan Long sat beneath the shade of an old cottonwood, repairing a broken combine directly in a wheat field, while Noah handed him tools from the truck bed. No corporate banners, no speeches, just work. The farmer who owned the combine, Rick Dunbar, stood nearby, sweating beneath brutal Kansas heat. "If this machine stops another day, I lose the whole field." Logan tightened a bolt calmly. "Then it won't stop. Simple as that." Rick stared at him for a second, because exhausted people sometimes forget certainty can still exist. Back in Harper Ridge, Wesley's problems kept growing. Parts delays increased. Corporate inventory targets rose. Interest rates climbed. And worst of all, farmers started waiting longer before buying new equipment. That terrified dealerships more than bad weather, because dealerships survive on movement, on upgrades, on constant replacement. But Logan's repaired tractors kept reducing the need for replacement. Every old Farmall he saved represented one less desperate customer walking into Wesley's showroom. Wesley knew it too. One August morning, he drove past Long Repair on the way to inspect leased property outside town. And for the first time, he really looked at the garage. Pickup trucks lined both sides of the dirt road. Farmers stood outside drinking coffee beside tractors in various states of repair. Noah welded near the open bay. Logan worked beneath the hood of an old International harvester, and every single man there looked calm. Wesley felt something ugly twist inside his chest. Jealousy. Not of the money, of the respect. Now sit with that for a moment, because respect earned through usefulness lasts longer than status purchased through success. Inside Granger Deere, employees came and went constantly. But out at Long Repair, farmers stayed after repairs just to talk. That difference haunted Wesley more than he admitted. Later that month, Ethan Pike approached Wesley inside the dealership office carrying sales reports. "These numbers are soft again." Wesley rubbed tired eyes. "Harvest'll improve them. Not enough." Ethan lowered his voice. "We need to push trade-ins harder." Wesley stared through the office window toward the lot. Rows of unsold equipment sat beneath blazing Kansas sun, millions of dollars worth of machinery waiting for buyers who no longer existed in large enough numbers. "What if they stop buying?" Wesley asked quietly. Ethan laughed nervously. "They can't farm forever with antiques." But deep down, both men knew some already were, and those antiques kept running. That autumn drought hit western Kansas harder than expected. Wheat yields dropped. Several ranches sold cattle early. Fuel prices spiked again. And suddenly Harper Ridge changed mood. People stopped talking about growth, started talking about survival. At Martha Reeves' diner one morning, farmers gathered around the counter discussing auction notices from nearby counties. Another foreclosure over in Carson. Heard the Miller place got split up. Bank took 2 combines out near Ellsworth. Quiet settled over the diner after that. Martha noticed Logan sitting silently in the corner booth drinking coffee before sunrise. "You hearing all this?" she asked softly. Logan nodded once. Martha crossed her arms sadly. "Feels like the town's shrinking." Logan stared out the window toward Main Street. "No," he said quietly. "Just running out of people allowed to fail." That sentence hit the room hard, because everybody there understood exactly what he meant. Modern farming had become brutally unforgiving. One bad year, one breakdown, one loan extension too far, and families disappeared. But Logan Long kept building something different out behind those wheat fields. Not an empire, not a corporation, a lifeline. And while Wesley Granger chased expansion, Logan chased reliability. One man built debt, the other built trust. Harper Ridge still didn't fully understand which one mattered more. But the balance had already started shifting, and storms were coming that would expose everything. The rain started 3 days before harvest. At first, nobody panicked. Kansas farmers understood weather the way sailors understood tides. A little rain before wheat harvest wasn't unusual. Sometimes it even helped. But this storm didn't stop. Clouds rolled over Harper County in heavy black layers, while cold wind bent wheat fields nearly sideways beneath the darkening sky. By the second day, combines started sinking into soft ground. By the third day, electronic failures began spreading across the county like sickness. And suddenly the future of modern farming looked a whole lot less impressive, buried axle deep in Kansas mud. Now, let me tell you something important. Machines only seem superior while conditions remain comfortable. Real judgment begins when things get ugly. At Granger John Deere, the service bays overflowed before sunrise. Farmers crowded the front office carrying soaked caps and exhausted expressions, while Ethan Pike tried desperately organizing repair schedules through overloaded computer systems. Sensor failures, electrical shutdowns, water-damaged modules, GPS calibration errors. The newer combines depended on electronics for almost everything, and heavy moisture was destroying them faster than the dealership could respond. "We need replacement control boards immediately," Ethan barked into a phone. But shipping delays had already started, because storms weren't only hitting Harper County, they stretched across half the Midwest. One farmer slammed his fist against the service counter. "My wheat's laying flat out there." Another shouted, "I got 2 days before mold starts." Inside the chaos, Wesley Granger tried maintaining authority. But panic has a sound, and everybody in that building could hear it. Meanwhile, 6 miles outside town, Logan Long stood beneath gray morning skies, tightening chains onto an old Farmall 806, while Noah loaded tools into the service truck. Rain dripped from the brim of Logan's faded cap. "You think the fields hold?" Noah asked. Logan looked toward the horizon. "No, that was all." Noah swallowed nervously. "Then why we heading out?" Logan climbed into the truck. "Because farmers still are. Now sit with that for a moment." That was the difference between Logan and most businesses. Businesses waited for conditions to improve. Logan showed up anyway. The first emergency call came from Rick Dunbar's wheat fields west of Harper Ridge. His modern combine sat dead in the mud, while rain hammered the windshield hard enough to sound like gravel. Rick stood beside the machine, soaked nearly to the bone. "Electrical systems fried," he shouted over the storm. Noah climbed into the cab and stared at blinking error codes across the display. "What do we do?" Logan looked across the field toward an old red International Harvester combine parked beside a tree line. "Who owns that?" Rick blinked. "Been sitting 2 years. Battery still in it." "Probably." Logan nodded once. "Go get chains." An hour later, that old combine roared to life beneath freezing rain, while newer machines remained silent across the county. No GPS, no touchscreen, no automated yield mapping, just diesel engine steel and mechanical reliability. And by sunset, Rick Dunbar's wheat started coming out of the field. Word spread immediately, because farming towns monitor survival stories faster than newspapers. At Martha Reeves's diner that evening, soaked farmers crowded around the counter talking over each other. Logan got Dunbar moving again, using an old International, Granger still waiting on computer parts. Martha poured coffee quietly while listening. Then Harold Whitman smiled into his cup, told everybody those old tractors still had fight left. Across town inside Granger Deere, nobody was smiling. Service technicians worked past midnight surrounded by half-disassembled electronic systems they couldn't fully repair without factory components. Wesley paced between bays, barking instructions. Ethan snapped at employees. Phones rang constantly, and every hour more rain arrived. Now let me pause here. There's a particular kind of fear businessmen experience when reality stops cooperating with their business model. That fear had started swallowing Wesley Granger whole, because the county was beginning to compare outcomes instead of appearances, and outcomes were humiliating him. The next morning, Noah and Logan drove toward another breakdown call through roads turned nearly to soup. Mud sprayed against the truck while wind pushed rain sideways across endless gray wheat fields. "You think Granger survives this?" Noah asked. Logan stared ahead through the windshield. "Storms don't create weakness." Noah waited. "They reveal it." That sentence proved true faster than either expected. By day 4 of the storm, multiple Deere combines remained parked dead across Harper County. Some farmers started abandoning them temporarily just to save portions of harvest using older backup machines Logan had repaired years earlier. Machines everybody once mocked. Farmalls, old cases, ancient Internationals. Suddenly, those obsolete tractors became lifelines. One scene especially stayed burned into Harper Ridge memory for years afterward. Late one evening near sunset, Logan and Noah crossed flooded county roads toward the Mercer family wheat fields after hearing a tractor had stalled in deep mud. When they arrived, 3 modern Deere tractors sat buried nearly to their axles beside the field entrance. Headlights reflected against rain and standing water. Nearby stood 6 exhausted farmers, arguing hopelessly. Then through the storm came the sound, low, heavy, mechanical, an old Farmall 560 pulling chains through the mud. Logan drove it himself, the same faded red tractor people once laughed at outside Granger Deere. Now let me tell you something. Humiliation becomes extremely dangerous once reality starts reversing it publicly. One by one, Logan pulled the larger tractors free, slowly, patiently. Steel chains groaning beneath tension while mud sprayed across the dark field. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody even spoke much. They just watched. Watched old machinery outperform expensive modern systems under conditions those systems weren't built to survive. Noah noticed something during that night. Farmers stopped looking at Logan like a mechanic. They started looking at him like certainty. And in hard times, certainty becomes priceless. Back at Granger Deere, Wesley finally snapped after another customer canceled a repair contract and hauled his combine directly to long repair instead. "He's running a junkyard," Wesley exploded. Ethan looked exhausted. "That junkyard's getting people moving." Silence hit the office, because both men knew the truth underneath that statement. The county no longer cared about image. Harvest was dying in wet fields, and Logan Long kept showing up where expensive systems failed. One rainy midnight, Noah and Logan worked beneath portable floodlights, repairing a broken axle beside Harold Whitman's wheat field. Water soaked through their coats, hands numb from cold, engines roaring somewhere beyond darkness. Noah tightened bolts silently for several minutes before finally asking, "You ever think about how different this could have gone?" Logan glanced toward the distant storm clouds. "What do you mean if Wesley hadn't fired you?" Logan returned to tightening the axle housing. "He didn't build this place." Noah frowned slightly. "Then who did?" Logan looked across the dark fields where old tractors still moved through rain, while modern combines sat silent. The farmers did. Now sit with that for a moment, because that was the truth nobody at Granger Deere understood until it was too late. Communities remember who stands beside them during storms. not who sold them promises during sunshine. By the end of that week, the rain finally stopped. Gray clouds broke apart over Harper County, while damaged wheat fields steamed beneath pale sunlight. Exhausted farmers slept wherever they could. And all across the county, one story spread louder than every dealership advertisement Wesley Granger had ever purchased. When the harvest nearly died, Logan Long kept it alive. And from that moment forward, Harper Ridge would never look at him the same way again. The foreclosure notice appeared on a Tuesday morning. By noon, everybody in Harper Ridge knew. That's how small farming towns work. Bad news moves faster than weather, especially when the bad news belongs to a man who once looked untouchable. The notice hung taped against the glass front doors of Granger John Deere, while cold November wind snapped the paper corners back and forth beneath gray skies. First Prairie Bank notice of asset seizure commercial default proceedings. Men slowed their pickup trucks driving past Main Street just to stare. Some pretended not to, but they all looked. Now let me tell you something important. There's a particular silence that follows public failure in rural America. Not celebration, not sympathy, recognition. Because most people standing there understand how close they themselves have come to losing everything, too. Inside the dealership, Wesley Granger sat alone in his office staring at unpaid invoices spread across the desk. The showroom lights still glowed. The polished floors still reflected rows of expensive equipment, but the illusion had cracked. And once illusions crack publicly, they rarely recover. Ethan Pike lasted 3 more days before leaving town entirely. No goodbye party, no speeches, just an empty apartment above Miller Hardware and a forwarding address somewhere near Tulsa. That's another thing about modern ambition. It leaves quickly when conditions stop rewarding it. Meanwhile, out at Long Repair, the work never slowed. Farmers still arrived before sunrise. Engines still needed rebuilding. Winter wheat still needed planting. And Logan Long kept working like nothing in Harper Ridge had changed at all. That bothered people almost as much as the foreclosure itself. Martha Reeves noticed it first. One icy morning, she carried coffee into the garage and found Logan rebuilding a cracked transmission housing while Noah sorted tools nearby. "You hear about Wesley?" Logan nodded once. "That's all you got to say." He tightened another bolt. "Nothing else helps him." Martha leaned against the workbench, studying him carefully. "You don't feel anything." Logan finally looked up. "I feel tired." That answer stayed with Martha long after she left, because it was honest. Revenge fantasies usually imagine satisfaction arriving loud and dramatic, but real life. Most wounded people eventually grow too exhausted to enjoy watching others collapse. Now sit with that for a moment. Logan Long had spent 14 years building something steady, while Wesley Granger spent 14 years defending something fragile. One man survived through patience, the other through appearances, and appearances always demand more maintenance than truth. A week later, Clay Turner arrived at Long Repair, carrying a folder thick enough to make Noah nervous immediately. The banker stood beside the heater, warming his hands before speaking. "Auction set for December 18th. Noah glanced up from the parts washer. "What auction?" Clay looked toward Logan. "Dealership property." Silence settled through the garage. Outside, wind swept dead leaves across the dirt lot, while an old Oliver tractor idled near the fence line. Logan continued working. "When's equipment liquidation?" "Separate date." Clay hesitated. "Building itself goes first." Noah watched Logan carefully, but Logan showed almost nothing, just calm, that same impossible calm he always carried. Clay lowered his voice. "There'll be outside buyers." "Probably. Developers too." Logan nodded once. Noah frowned slightly after Clay left. "You thinking about going to the auction?" "Yeah." Logan wiped grease from his hands slowly. "Maybe." But Noah noticed something then. For the first time in years, Logan locked the office drawer before leaving that night. And 2 evenings later, Noah accidentally discovered why. Now let me tell you about that moment, because some realizations arrive quietly enough to change your understanding of a person forever. Logan had driven into town for welding gas refills, leaving Noah alone closing the garage after dark. Snow drifted lightly outside while wind rattled the old siding. Noah entered the office searching for invoice paper and noticed the drawer slightly open. Inside sat stacks of bank envelopes, savings certificates, investment statements, carefully organized records spanning years. 14 years. Noah stared in disbelief. Logan hadn't just been surviving, he'd been preparing. Every repaired tractor, every long winter, every extra shift, every dollar not spent. The old man had been building something nobody else noticed. Not wealth exactly, strength. When Logan returned an hour later, Noah stood waiting beside the office desk. "You're buying it." Logan removed his gloves slowly. "Buying what?" "The dealership." Silence. Outside, snow tapped softly against the garage windows. Finally, Logan sighed. "Noah, you've been saving for years." Logan set the welding tanks down carefully. "That building matters, to you, to the town." Noah shook his head in disbelief. "After everything Wesley did." Logan looked around the garage quietly. "You know what that place used to be before Wesley changed it?" Noah waited. "A repair shop." That answer explained more than Noah expected. Now let me pause here. People assumed Logan's story was about revenge because revenge is easier to understand than restoration. But Logan never wanted Wesley's humiliation. He wanted the thing Harper Ridge lost, when profit replaced usefulness, a place where farmers mattered more than financing. The following weeks felt strange across town. Granger Deer sat mostly empty. Snow collected against silent machinery. Half the inventory had already been hauled away under repossession orders. At Martha Reeves's diner, conversations lowered whenever Wesley entered. Not because people hated him, because watching fallen pride up close makes decent people uncomfortable. One morning, Wesley sat alone drinking cold coffee near the window when Harold Whitman approached slowly. "Sorry about the dealership," Harold said quietly. Wesley stared into his cup. "Everybody warned me eventually." Harold nodded sadly. "You forgot farmers ain't corporations." Wesley almost laughed after hearing that, because deep down he knew Harold was right. Across Harper Ridge, rumors spread fast about the upcoming auction. Outside investors, storage companies, regional dealership chains. Everybody assumed some corporation would buy the property. Nobody seriously imagined Logan Long. That made the secret even more powerful. 3 nights before the auction, Noah found Logan sitting alone inside the garage office reviewing paperwork beneath a single desk lamp. Snow blew hard outside. "You nervous?" Noah asked. Logan kept reading. "No, you should be." That finally earned a small smile. Noah sat across from him. "What if somebody outbids you?" Logan leaned back quietly. "Then somebody else owns a building. That's it." Logan looked toward the dark garage where generations of repaired tractors sat waiting for morning pickup. "Noah, don't ever tie your worth to winning." The kid frowned slightly. "Then why do this?" Logan answered softly. "Because some places deserve another chance." Now sit with that for a moment. That sentence carried the entire soul of the man. Not bitterness, not ego, responsibility. Outside, Harper Ridge prepared for winter while foreclosure signs swayed in freezing wind along Main Street, and nobody yet understood what was coming. Not Wesley Granger, not Clay Turner, not the men gossiping inside the diner every morning, because 14 years earlier, Wesley thought he fired an outdated mechanic carrying a rusty toolbox into the snow. What he actually did was force a quiet man to build something stronger than pride. And in just a few more days, the entire county was about to witness the difference. Auction day arrived beneath a hard, gray Kansas sky. Cold wind swept down Main Street, carrying dust-dead leaves and the strange electric tension that settles over small towns before something important happens. By 8:30 that morning, pickup trucks already lined both sides of the street outside Granger John Deere. Farmers stood in groups drinking coffee from paper cups while pretending they weren't there to witness a man's downfall, but they were. Now let me tell you something. Public humiliation attracts crowds. especially in places where everybody secretly fears becoming the next cautionary story. The big green dealership sign still stood above the building. Granger John Deere, but beneath it folding tables held foreclosure paperwork, while county officials arranged bid sheets against the showroom windows. The place no longer felt powerful, just hollow. Inside, fluorescent lights reflected against polished floors that suddenly looked too bright for the mood in the room. Rows of machinery had already been removed. Only emptiness remained, and emptiness has a way of exposing truth. Wesley Granger stood near the office hallway wearing the same dark wool coat he always wore during winter auctions and county events. From a distance, he still looked important, but closer people noticed the exhaustion, shoulders tighter, eyes heavier, pride trying desperately to survive embarrassment. Martha Reeves entered quietly through the front doors, carrying coffee for Harold Whitman and a few others standing near the back. "You think he'll show?" Harold asked softly. Martha glanced toward the entrance. "He always does." Harold nodded slowly, because deep down everybody knew exactly who he meant. At 8:57 a.m., the sound finally arrived. Low, steady, mechanical, heads turned toward Main Street, and there came Logan Long driving slowly through town, inside that same faded red Farmall 560 people once laughed at 14 years earlier. The tractor rattled gently beneath the cold wind, while black smoke curled from the vertical exhaust pipe into the winter sky. Some younger men smirked automatically. Old habits, old arrogance. One whispered, "Still driving junk." But nobody laughed very hard this time, because Harper Ridge remembered the harvest storm. They remembered which machines kept moving, and more importantly, they remembered which man showed up. Now sit with that for a moment. Respect changes the sound of a crowd. Logan parked beside the curb directly in front of the dealership. Then he climbed down slowly, carrying a worn brown envelope beneath one arm. No dramatic expression, no swagger, just calm, the same calm Wesley Granger once mistook for weakness. Noah Bennett stepped out of Logan's truck parked behind the tractor and followed quietly beside him. Inside the dealership, conversations lowered immediately as Logan entered. Even the auctioneer paused organizing paperwork. Wesley looked up from across the showroom floor, and for just 1 second something crossed his face that Harper Ridge had never seen before. Fear, not fear of violence, fear of recognition, because deep down Wesley already understood something terrible. The town trusted Logan more than they ever trusted him. Now let me tell you something important. Businesses survive on numbers, but communities survive on memory. And Harper Ridge remembered everything. The auction began exactly at 9. The auctioneer cleared his throat loudly. Commercial property parcel 1, Granger Agricultural Equipment. Main facility bidding started cautiously. A regional storage company offered first. Then an equipment chain from Wichita. Then an agricultural investor from Salina joined in. Numbers climbed steadily across the room while cold wind rattled the front windows. Wesley stood silent near the back office doorway, hands in his coat pockets, jaw tight enough to crack stone. Noah leaned toward Logan quietly. "You nervous now?" Logan kept watching the bidding. "No, you got enough," Logan answered without emotion. "Enough." That word settled over Noah harder than expected, because it suddenly revealed what 14 years of quiet work had built. Not riches. Freedom. The bids continued climbing. 200,000, 250, 300. The Wichita group hesitated first. The storage company folded next. Only the Salina investor remained. The auctioneer looked across the room. 340,000. Pause. Any advance? Silence. The investor nodded once. 350. People shifted nervously. Most assumed it was over. Even Noah's stomach tightened slightly. Then Logan finally raised one hand. 360. Every head in the building turned at once, not toward the investor, toward Logan Long. Now sit with that moment, because sometimes the loudest sound in the world is silence arriving after underestimation collapses. Wesley stared across the showroom floor like somebody had punched the air from his lungs. The Selena investor frowned. 370. The auctioneer pointed immediately. 370,000. Then Logan spoke again. Calm, steady, 400. Gasps rippled softly through the room. Martha Reeves slowly lowered her coffee cup. Harold Whitman just smiled quietly into his weathered hands, because suddenly everybody understood. Those 14 years hadn't been about survival. They'd been about preparation. The Selena investor hesitated longer this time, whispered with his partner, shook his head. The auctioneer scanned the room carefully. $400,000 once. Wesley's breathing visibly changed. Twice. Outside, winter wind howled across Main Street, while the old Farmall sat idling near the curb, like a stubborn piece of history refusing to disappear. Sold. The hammer struck, and Harper Ridge fell completely silent. Logan Long stood motionless while paperwork changed hands beneath fluorescent showroom lighting. The exact same showroom where Wesley Granger once fired him for repairing worthless red junk. Now let me pause here. Most revenge fantasies end with screaming, humiliation, cruel victory speeches, but real power rarely raises its voice. Wesley walked slowly toward Logan after the paperwork was signed. The room watched every step. "You planned this," Wesley asked quietly. Logan folded the documents carefully into the brown envelope. "No." Wesley looked confused, then angry. "Don't lie to me." Logan finally met his eyes. "You fired me." Silence. "That part wasn't my plan." Wesley swallowed hard after hearing that, because for the first time in 14 years he fully understood what he had actually destroyed that snowy night in Bay 4. Not an employee. Trust. Logan glanced once around the empty showroom floor, then calmly said the sentence Harper Ridge would repeat for years afterward. Turns out old things last longer than pride. Nobody moved after that. Nobody even breathed much, because deep down everybody standing there understood the truth underneath those words. Wesley built his life chasing appearance. Logan built his life chasing usefulness. And usefulness survives storms longer than image ever will. As people slowly filtered outside into the freezing Kansas afternoon, Noah remained standing beside Logan near the showroom windows. "You really bought the whole place," Noah whispered. Logan looked across the empty building quietly. "Needs work." Noah laughed softly under his breath. That finally earned the smallest smile from Logan. Outside, the old red Farmall still idled steadily beside the curb. The same tractor once mocked outside this building, the same machine Wesley Granger called junk. And now it sat in front of property owned by the man who never stopped believing old things still mattered. Now let me tell you something important before we go further. Harper Ridge thought that auction ended a foreclosure story. It didn't. It ended an era. And what Logan Long built afterward would change that town far more than anybody standing in that showroom realized yet. 3 months after the auction, the old Granger John Deere building looked completely different. Not newer, better. Now let me tell you something important. There's a difference between restoration and replacement. Replacement erases history. Restoration respects it. Logan Long understood that better than anyone in Harper Ridge. The giant green dealership sign disappeared first, not ripped down dramatically, not smashed, just quietly removed one cold February morning while snow drifted across Main Street and a few farmers watched from parked pickup trucks. In its place, Noah Bennett and 2 local welders mounted a new steel sign above the entrance. Long Agricultural Repair and Training Hall. No corporate logo, no flashing advertisements. Just plain black lettering against weathered steel. And somehow that sign fit Harper Ridge better than the old one ever had. Inside the building, Logan changed almost everything. The showroom floor became open repair space. Unused sales offices turned into training rooms. Rows of financing desks disappeared completely. In their place came workbenches, parts shelves, engine stands, and one long wooden table where farmers drank coffee while waiting on repairs. The town noticed immediately, because for the first time in years, the building felt alive instead of expensive. Now sit with that for a moment. Buildings carry the spirit of the people running them. Under Wesley Granger, the dealership felt like pressure. Under Logan Long, it felt like usefulness. Young men started arriving within weeks, asking about mechanic training, not because they dreamed about getting rich, because farming towns still needed skills that mattered. Logan never advertised classes officially. He just taught whoever showed up willing to work. Noah handled most beginner lessons by then. How do you know when an engine's starving for fuel? What causes hydraulic cavitation? What's the sound of bad timing under load? The old building filled again with questions instead of sales pitches, and Harper Ridge slowly began healing in ways nobody expected. One afternoon, Martha Reeves walked through the repair bays, carrying pies for the mechanics, and stopped near the entrance, watching Noah teach 3 teenagers how to rebuild a starter assembly. She smiled quietly. "Looks different in here." Logan glanced around the building. "Supposed to." Martha folded her arms. "You know what people call this place now, Nome? The heartbeat of the county." Logan immediately shook his head. People say dumb things. But Martha noticed something rare then. The corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. Outside, old tractors lined the parking lot beside newer machines waiting for repairs. Farmalls beside Deeres, cases beside New Hollands. Logan refused brand loyalty inside the shop. If it feeds families, he told Noah once, it deserves fixing. That philosophy spread fast, especially among farmers tired of being treated like financing opportunities instead of neighbors. Now, let me pause here. The strongest communities aren't built by people chasing importance. They're built by people chasing usefulness, long enough that importance arrives accidentally. By summer, even neighboring counties sent equipment to Long agricultural repair, not because it was flashy, because it was trusted, and trust had become rare. Meanwhile, Wesley Granger disappeared almost entirely from public life. His house sold quietly in early spring. His expensive truck vanished soon after. Most people assumed he'd moved away, but Harper Ridge wasn't finished with him yet. One humid August afternoon, Noah entered Logan's office carrying inventory paperwork before stopping mid-sentence. A man stood near the front counter looking smaller than Noah remembered, older too. Wesley Granger removed his cap awkwardly when he saw Noah staring. Logan around Noah hesitated before pointing toward Bay 3. Wesley walked slowly through the building while mechanics worked nearby. Nobody mocked him, nobody whispered. That surprised him most, because humiliation always feels louder in your imagination than in reality. He found Logan rebuilding a diesel injector pump near the back wall. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Wesley cleared his throat. "I hear you need parts inventory help." Logan kept working quietly. "We manage." Wesley nodded slowly. "Right. Now let me tell you something important. Failure strips performance away from people. And once the performance disappears, all that remains is truth." Wesley looked older because the arrogance finally had nowhere left to hide. "I was wrong," he said quietly. Logan continued adjusting the injector housing. "You'll need to narrow that down." A weak smile crossed Wesley's face despite himself. Then silence settled again. Finally, Wesley spoke softer. "I forgot who this town actually belonged to." That made Logan stop working, not because the statement surprised him, because it was honest. Wesley swallowed hard before continuing. "I spent years thinking bigger meant better." He glanced around the shop. "But this place matters more now than it ever did when I owned it." Logan wiped his hands slowly with an old red rag. "You hungry?" Wesley blinked in confusion. What Martha's Diner still open? That was Logan Long. No speeches, no revenge monologues, just quiet mercy where bitterness would have been easier. Later that evening, after Martha fed Wesley coffee and meatloaf, without charging him, Logan sat beside him outside beneath fading Kansas sunset. Traffic rolled slowly down Main Street. Farm trucks, grain haulers, dust rising gold beneath evening light. "You hate me?" Wesley asked finally. Logan stared toward the horizon. No. Why not? Logan thought for several seconds before answering. Too tiring carrying people that long. Now sit with that for a moment, because that sentence held the entire lesson of the story. Logan Long didn't win because he destroyed Wesley Granger. He won because he refused to become him. A week later, Wesley started working part-time organizing old parts inventory in the rear warehouse. Small job, quiet work, no authority, no office. And Logan never once used the opportunity to humiliate him. The town noticed that too. Harold Whitman summed it up best one morning at Martha's diner. Anybody can kick a man while he's falling. Harold sipped coffee slowly. Takes something rarer to leave dignity intact. Nobody argued. Because Harper Ridge had witnessed both kinds of men now. The kind who builds status through pressure, and the kind who builds respect through service. Years passed. The training hall expanded slowly. Noah eventually took over most day-to-day operations, while Logan spent more time teaching than repairing. Teenagers who once planned on leaving Kansas learned skilled trades instead. Farmers stayed operational longer. More family land survived bad seasons. And above the entrance to the old dealership building, the steel sign weathered beneath decades of Kansas wind. Long Agricultural Repair and Training Hall. People driving through Harper Ridge often assumed the place had always belonged there. That's how completely Logan changed the town. But older farmers remembered. They remembered the snowstorm firing, the harvest rains, the foreclosure auction, and the old red Farmall rattling through Main Street while proud men laughed too early. Now let me tell you one final thing before we finish. The world spends a lot of time celebrating men who grow fast. But farms, machines, and communities usually survive because of the people willing to grow slowly, steadily, quietly, like Logan Long. And maybe that's why, years later, the old mechanics in Harper Ridge still smiled whenever they heard a battered Farmall engine echo across Kansas fields. Because sometimes the things people call outdated are the very things that carry everyone else through the storm. After all these years, the people of Harper Ridge eventually understood something Wesley Granger learned too late. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like an old mechanic staying late to help a struggling farmer. Sometimes it sounds like a worn-out tractor still starting on freezing mornings when newer machines fail. And sometimes the people most worth respecting are the ones the world laughed at first. Logan Long never became rich in the way magazines celebrate. He never built a corporate empire, never chased attention, but he built something far rarer, trust. And in hard times, trust feeds more families than pride ever will. That's the thing about quiet people. The world often mistakes their silence for weakness, right until everyone suddenly needs them. So if this story reminded you of someone, an old farmer, mechanic, rancher, parent, or neighbor who kept showing up without asking for recognition, leave their name in the comments, because people like that deserve to be remembered. And if you're still with me, subscribe to the channel for more stories about the men and women who carried entire communities without ever demanding applause. Sometimes the strongest legacy a person leaves behind is simply being dependable when everybody else quits.